European Union leaders are planning to curb Africa immigration from across the Mediterranean, but are as divided as ever on how to take care of refugees who still make it to Europe. Chairman of the Union, Donald Tusk, proposed creating a new financing tool in the bloc's next multi-year budget from 2021 to stem illegal migration, replacing the ad hoc calls for money that EU states have seen since arrivals peaked in 2015. Despite heavy criticism by human rights groups that is aggravating the suffering of refugees and migrants on the southern shore of the Mediterranean, the EU is sticking to its policy of providing various kinds of assistance to the governments and UN agencies in the Middle East and Africa in order to prevent people making the trek up north. Now, for more on this, I'm being joined by Achuke Chude, the African Affairs Analyst, to talk us through on this issue. And glad to have you on the program, Network Africa.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Now, let's start off looking at what the European Union leaders are trying to do. They're planning to curb Africa immigration, of course, from across the Mediterranean, but they are as divided, as you heard from that report. Do you think they can really achieve this by, trying to stem the tide, of Africans wanting to cross, the Mediterranean into Europe?
Maybe not as much as they would want to, but before they're able to do that, there must be some form of a consensus on the part of European Union leaders. They have not been able to come up with that. They have not been able to have a common approach. They have not come up with exactly how they intend to do it. And so you find this, back and forth criticisms, of one another. For instance, you also have, some of them having meetings while meetings are being held, for instance, with between the bilateral meetings are being held by the European Union and then the African Union, that held some few weeks back in Addis Ababa. You also have a quartet of Spain, France, Germany, and Italy also having meetings with countries like Niger, Chad, and then the UN recognized the Libyan government. All of these things are, of course, disparate meetings, different, and that is exactly the hallmark of the division that you see, among European Union countries. Of course, some are criticizing, heavily critical of the Dublin Agreement, which states that once refugees or illegal immigrants get to the shores of some of the southern coastal countries, that would be their first port of call. They get registered there, and then that those countries have responsibilities towards these refugees. But countries like Greece and Italy are very, very angry about that, and they are saying that other European countries have obligations, and that these obligations must be met. It would appear that the European Court of Justice also put a spanner in the works by the declaration, that all the European Union states have to respect quotas. So the 120,000 migrants that are in Greece and part in Italy and so on have to be divided on the basis of the quota system that has been agreed upon and so on. So there's really no consensus yet on how to approach this particular issue, and we see that in the various arrangements that different countries within the European Union are making.
Because it's good you pointed that out, because I was going to ask you if countries like Italy, Greece, who want to take in a set of allocation of asylum seekers, but it does appear some other countries are backing out, so to say.
Yes, and you must know that there are deep-rooted problems even within these countries. Of course, we have seen over the years the rise of far-right sentiments, political parties in Europe, and then sentiments across countries and in Europe, and that is causing problem for long-established political establishments in all of these countries. And so there has to be a response that tends to assuage the people that they are actually in control of what is going on. A lot of people are really worried about the continuous influx of refugees in some of these countries. And again, while some might have different approach, knowledge and understanding of what is going on. Countries like, Germany, for instance, you see Angela Merkel also making a distinction between the kind of, immigrants that come into Germany. And she has admitted that they have international obligations which they have to meet, but not when it comes to economic refugees, where they do not have any international compulsion, to bring these people in. So these are some of the various problems that a lot of these other countries are having. And like I said, Greece and Italy are the receiving end of it. And they have been accused, like Greece has been accused several times of waiving, not complying with the Dublin Agreement, where they are supposed to register the asylum seekers or refugees, the refugees when they come in and then they remain there. So what they do is that, once they come in, they push them onto other countries also, and those other countries are not exactly happy with what is happening.
Okay, let me just, because we're running out of time, but let me just ask you, what do you think can actually be done to stop this ugly trend of, young Africans wanting to, because it doesn't look as if there's any end in sight, really.
Well, I think there is a general agreement or consensus across board, really, that we need to, that some of these things, or virtually all of these things, are home-rooted. And that so you need to tackle this matter, at their roots, and they're happening here in the destination countries. We need to begin to talk development in Africa. We need to begin to do something about the, inequality and the poverty that we have in Africa. And that is why a lot of these people are living. Most of them are essentially, economic migrants. And the fact that they are willing to do away with even the fear and the dangers that they meet on the road, in spite of all the atrocities that we have been seeing, yet a lot of them are still hell-bent on getting to Europe. Tells you the degree of anger and the degree of despair that a lot of them have in the ability of their home countries to solve the basic economic problems that they find themselves in. So much more needs to be done by African countries. And of course, you know that what has happened in Libya too is also a machination of even the Western countries, fueling, some of the atrocities that we have been seeing by their support of, some of these illegal militias.
Yes, we really need to end it there. But definitely, I think you've driven your point home, and I want to thank you again for your thoughts on the program. Chukwuechi, the African Affairs Analyst, there for his thoughts on the immigration or the migration issue of Africans across the Mediterranean. Well, still to come on the program. South Sudan government says the country needs $1.7 billion in aid next year to help some 6 million people cope with the effects of war and hunger. In a moment.